Good day, everyone. I am John Elmer Grospe and I am here to discuss the gender and sexuality. Let us first take a look at these definitions of terms. Sex is defined as the physical variations between bodies that are found to be male, female, or intersex. Primary sex characteristics, those associated directly with the reproductive system, as well as secondary sex characteristics, those not directly associated with the reproductive system, such as breasts and facial hair, are all considered to be aspects of sex. The biologically determined sex of an individual does not necessarily match their gender. As a result, the terms sex and gender are not interchangeable. A person's sex is determined at birth. Based on sex traits such as the type of sex organs, doctors or other labor support personnel often determine whether the newborn baby is male or female. People who are intersex are born with sex characteristics such as gonads, chromosomes, and genitalia that do not correspond to the traditional binary classification of male or female bodies. Intersex features occasionally seen from birth, but they do not frequently emerge until adolescence. It is possible that some genetic intersex traits will never manifest. Being intersex is distinct from a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, and is related to biological sex traits. In order to make intersex babies and children's bodies conform to binary notions of male or female and prepare them to be raised as the selected sex, doctors occasionally perform surgery on them. In adolescence, it's possible that person's sex was misclassified later on. The term gender refers to social or cultural categorizations that are connected to being male, female, or intersex. The World Health Organization defined gender as the socially constructed traits of men, women, girls, and boys. This covers interpersonal connections as well as the standards, mannerisms, and roles that go along with being a woman, man, girl, or boy. Gender is a social concept that differs from culture to culture and can evolve over time. The phrase gender identity refers to a young child establishing a core sense of belonging to one sex and not the other. It was almost simultaneously coined in the early 1900s by psychologist Zucker and psychotherapist Stroller. Structured verbal interviewing approaches can be used to measure gender identification. A person's feeling of self or belonging to a specific gender is referred to as gender identity. Gender role. Developmental psychologists frequently use the phrase gender role to refer to actions, attitudes, and personality qualities that are more proper or typical of the male or female social role in a specific culture and historical period, respectively. Children's gender role behaviors, such as toy preferences, can be measured through early observation. Sexual orientation. The degree to which a person is receptive to sexual cues defines their sexual orientation. The sex of the person to whom one is sexually attracted is likely the most prominent aspect of a sexual orientation. A person's sense of identity based on these attractions, associated behaviors, and membership in a group of others who share those attractions is also referred as their sexual orientation according to the American Psychological Association. There are numerous methods to define sexual orientation nowadays. While heterosexuality, which is also referred to as being straight, is an attraction to people of the opposite sex or gender. Homosexuality, often known as being gay or lesbian, is an attraction to people of one's own sex or gender. In the past, the term bisexuality was used to describe an attraction to people who were either of the male or female sex, but more recently, it has come to mean attraction to people of any sex or gender in non-binary models of sex and gender. Other names such as pansexuality and polysexuality have been created to describe attraction to both sexes and genders and attraction to several sexes or genders. Asexuality is the state of not being attracted to any particular sex or gender. Physical issues are not the cause of being asexual, and the lack of desire for sex does not bother the person. Asexuality is being studied as a separate sexual orientation. The current scientific theory holds that people typically become aware of their sexual orientation between middle childhood and the beginning of adolescence. It's important to note that this isn't always the case and that some people don't realize their sexual orientation until much later in life. People can be celibate and still be conscious of their sexual orientation. It is not required to engage in sexual activity to be aware of these emotional, romantic, and physical inclinations. According to some academics, sexual orientation is neither fixed nor inborn, but rather fluctuates and changes throughout the course of a person's lifetime. Sexual identity. It is critical to separate the concepts of sexual identity and sexual orientation. For whatever reason, a person may, for instance, be predominantly aroused by homosexual cues, yet not identify as a homosexual. This idea has been most forcefully put forth by sociologists, particularly those of the social scripting and social constructionist schools, who contend that the incorporation of sexual orientation into one's sense of identity is a recent phenomenon, culturally variable, and the outcome of a complex interplay of socio-historical events. Many people in modern Western culture are predominantly or exclusively attracted to others of the same sex but choose not to identify as homosexual or gay. Additionally, there are people who exhibit substantial homosexual conduct but are not typically stimulated by homosexual stimuli or do not identify as homosexual, such as male teens who engage in sex with men for financial gain. As a result, it is important to consider the actual data on the discrepancies between sexual orientation and sexual identity. There are many different ways that sexuality can be felt or expressed. Beliefs, attitudes, values, behaviors, practices, roles, and relationships are among the many things that are included. The biological and physical aspects of sexuality primarily deal with the reproductive system, including the human sexual cycle and the universal biological drive. The relationships between the people that are conveyed through intense emotions or physical indications of love, trust, and caring are considered an emotional aspects of sexuality. While spirituality is concerned with a person's spiritual connection to others through sexuality, social elements are concerned with how human society affects one's sexuality. The cultural, political, legal, intellectual, moral, ethical, and religious aspects of life have an effect on and are influenced by sexuality. The attitudes of society towards sexuality have changed over time and are still changing today, affected by anything from philosophy to religion. In the past, religion has had the biggest impact on sexual behavior. The sexual response cycle. A person's total sexual drive or desire for sexual engagement is known as sexual motivation, often referred as libido. Social, psychological, and biological variables all influence this motivation. Sex hormones regulate the capacity to engage in sexual behaviors in the majority of mammalian species. However, sex hormones are merely one factor influencing the drive to engage in sexual behaviors. They do not directly affect the capacity to copulate in primates, including humans. Both internal psychological elements like personality and stress, and external factors like employment and family have an effect. Hormones, illnesses, medications, lifestyle stress, or pregnancy and interpersonal problems can all have an impact on sex drive. A model that explains the physiological reactions that happen during sexual engagement is called sexual response cycle. The cycle is divided into 4 stages, according to Kinsey, Pomeroy, and Martin. Excitement, plateau, climax, and resolution. The intrinsic or inner urge to pursue sex emerges during the excitement phase. The plateau phase, which precedes climax by causing an increase in heart rate and blood flow, is a time of intense sexual arousal. Orgasm is the release of tension, and the resolution is period, which comes before the cycle is restarted, is the unaroused state. The brain and sex. The brain is the organ that converts nerve impulses from the skin into pleasurable sensations, which is why the brain and sex go hand in hand. It regulates the nerves and muscles involved in sexual activity. Hormones, which are thought to be the biological basis of sexual desire, are controlled by the brain. It is claimed that the sexual thoughts and fantasies originate in the cerebral cortex, the outer layer of the brain responsible for thought and reasoning. The limbic system, which includes the amygdala, hippocampus, cingulate gyrus, and septal region, is located beneath the cortex. These structures are crucial for sexual behavior since they are thought to be the origin of emotions and sentiments. The most crucial area of the brain for sexual activity is the hypothalamus. This is the tiny region of the brain's base that is made up of various clusters of nerve cells and gets information from the limbic system. Studies on lab animals have demonstrated that the full cessation of sexual behavior results from the loss of specific hypothalamic regions, but the pituitary gland, which secretes hormones that regulate the other glands in the body, is one of the reasons why hypothalamus is important. The brain and hormones. The pituitary gland secrete a number of vital sex-related hormones. When an orgasm is experienced during sexual activity, the hormone of love known as oxytocin is produced. When a woman gives birth or breastfeeds, oxytocin is also released. It is thought that oxytocin plays a role in maintaining close relationships. Females are stimulated to produce milk by both prolactin and oxytocin. By causing egg maturity, follicle-stimulating hormone or FSH causes ovulation in females. It also boosts sperm production in males. When a female is ovulating, luteinizing hormone or LH causes the release of a developed egg. Male sexual motivation appears to be significantly influenced by testosterone in guys. Male arousal is mediated by vasopressin, and the rise in vasopressin during the erectile response may be directly related to an increased drive for sexual behavior. Due in large part to the overemphasis on male sexuality in Western research, the relationship between hormones and female sexual motivation is not well understood. Female sexual behavior is normally regulated by the hormones estrogen and progesterone, with estrogen increasing drive and progesterone reducing it. Throughout a woman's menstrual cycle, these hormone levels fluctuate, the same ways that testosterone, oxytocin, and vasopressin are implicated in male sexual motivation and in female sexual motivation, according to studies. But more studies are required to fully grasp these connections. Sexual orientation and gender identity are both significant components of a person's entire identity, but in each instance, stereotypes that are harmful to people who identify as gender varied or as sexual minorities are nonetheless produced by social constructions of gender and sexuality. This could be one of the reasons both concepts are still used interchangeably. People need to understand that gender and sexuality are not always linked for each individual, and that judgments about someone's sexual orientation should never be made based on their gender or the other way around. Some people who now identify themselves as gays or lesbians were quite shy before coming out. They gain confidence after coming out as homosexuals. We feel terrible about forcing ourselves to be someone we aren't and telling ourselves lies just to fit in society. But if we are truly being honest with ourselves, we will feel more at ease doing activities we enjoy. It's not as horrible as we might imagine to come out of the closet, because this could be the first step toward real happiness. People should be allowed to explore and define their sexual orientation and gender identity in the manner that feels most comfortable to them. They can be the most authentic versions of themselves by doing this. Since sexuality is dynamic and constantly evolving, we frequently find that several aspects of our lives may interact with one another in perplexing or gratifying ways. This is acceptable and is a natural component of how we grow. A major factor of determining our health and well-being is the exploration of our own sexuality, which should be based on the concepts of permission and sexual rights. And that is all from me. I hope you learned something about today's discussion. Again, I'm Janel Mergrospe, and see you next time.